What does it take to defy death? Not just on the battlefield, but after. Imagine you're in a body bag. You are unconscious, not breathing, and have been pronounced dead. A doctor begins to zip the bag up over your face, but you summon the last ounce of will you possess and spit in his face. That almost unbelievable act of defiance is a true story, and it's a perfect example of what this research calls the Texas template of courage. The veterans from this state, from World War I to the modern day, share a common thread of defiant resilience, profound leadership, and a willingness to challenge established boundaries. These are stories of a mess attendant, barred from combat training, who single-handedly manned a machine gun during the attack on Pearl Harbor. Of a general who, when surrounded and outnumbered 8-1, famously declared, "We're not retreating, we're just advancing in a different direction." They're stories of a submarine commander who inverted naval tactics to hunt the destroyers that were hunting him. And of a 110-pound boy who was first told to be a cook, but instead climbed onto a burning tank destroyer, alone, to hold off an entire company of enemy infantry. These are the stories of the Texas template. But which one of these figures became the most decorated American soldier of World War II, earning more medals for valor than any other? Stick around to find out. Their stories personify the U.S. Army's warrior ethos. I will never accept defeat. I will never quit. They are not static history, but vital, dynamic lessons in leadership and duty for a new generation. If you believe these stories of defiance deserve to be told, help us defy the algorithm by liking this video and subscribing for more profiles in valor. Doris Dorie Miller was born in Waco, Texas, the son of sharecroppers. A powerful fullback on his high school football team and an excellent marksman from hunting small game, his name came from a touching anecdote. His mother, hoping for a girl, named him after the midwife who delivered him. Like many, Miller sought to escape the Great Depression's limitations. After being turned away from the Army, he enlisted in the U.S. Navy in 1939. But he was immediately placed in a box by the Navy's institutionalized discrimination. At the time, black sailors were limited to messman and general service roles. He was made a mess attendant third class, a role that made him ineligible for promotion and, most critically, barred him from receiving any gunnery training. On December 7, 1941, Miller was aboard the battleship USS West Virginia, anchored at Pearl Harbor. He was below decks collecting laundry when the first Japanese torpedo struck the ship. He raced to his assigned battle station, an anti-aircraft gun magazine, only to find it destroyed by a torpedo hit. He then made his way to the bridge, where he found the ship's captain, Mervyn Benyon, mortally wounded by shrapnel. Despite enemy strafing and bombing, Miller helped move his captain to a place of greater safety. He was then ordered to load ammunition for 2.50 caliber anti-aircraft machine guns. When one of the gunners finished, Miller, on his own initiative, manned the unattended weapon and began firing at the attacking Japanese planes. This was a weapon he had never been trained to use. He fired for approximately 15 minutes, until the gun was out of ammunition and the order came to abandon the sinking ship. Even then, his heroism continued. He began pulling his fellow sailors from the oil-slicked water, some of it on fire, saving numerous lives. He was one of the last 3 men to leave the West Virginia as it sank. Miller's heroism on December 7th was only the beginning of his story. The Navy's initial report praised the bravery of an unnamed Negro mess attendant. While white heroes were being named, Miller remained anonymous. This anonymity was a direct challenge to the black press and civil rights organizations, who were promoting a double V campaign: victory against fascism abroad and victory against discrimination at home. The NAACP and the Pittsburgh Courier launched a relentless pressure campaign, demanding the Navy identify and honor this hero. After months of pressure, the Navy finally identified the man as Doris Miller of Waco. Public outcry called for him to receive the Medal of Honor, but this was actively blocked by Secretary of the Navy Frank Knox, who opposed integrating black sailors into combat roles. President Franklin D. Roosevelt eventually intervened, approving the Navy Cross. On May 27, 1942, Admiral Chester Nimitz, Commander-in-Chief of the Pacific Fleet, personally presented Miller with the Navy Cross aboard the USS Enterprise. It was a history-making moment. Dorie Miller became the first African-American hero of World War II and the first black sailor in history to receive the Navy Cross. Miller's story became a rallying cry for desegregation and a powerful catalyst for the full integration of the U.S. Armed Forces in 1948. Tragically, Miller would not live to see this change. On November 24, 1943, he was killed in action when his ship, the USS Liscum Bay, was torpedoed and sank in just 23 minutes. In 2020, the Navy announced its ultimate recognition. A future Ford-class nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, CVN-81, will be named the USS Doris Miller. He is the first enlisted sailor and the first African American to have an aircraft carrier, one of the most powerful symbols of American might, named in his honor. In the brutal winter of 1950, Major General Oliver P. Smith, born in Menard, Texas, found his 1st Marine Division ambushed and completely encircled at the Chosin Reservoir by 120,000 Chinese troops. Smith was the antithesis of the stereotypical hard-charging Marine general. He was a thoughtful, cautious military leader whose intellectual and deliberate nature earned him the nicknames the Professor and the Student General. The battle was fought in unimaginably cold conditions, with temperatures plunging to minus 30 degrees Fahrenheit and minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Weapons froze solid, metal vehicle parts snapped, and frostbite became an enemy as lethal as the Chinese forces. One survivor later recounted that it took 30 minutes to remove his boots as they were frozen stuck to my feet. Surrounded, outnumbered 8-1 in some areas, and cut off, Smith's superiors suggested he abandon his heavy equipment and his wounded and fight his way out. Smith flatly refused. His philosophy was clear: I'm going to fight my way out. I'm going to take all my equipment and all my wounded and as many dead as I can. When a journalist later asked the general to comment on the retreat, Smith gave one of the most iconic, defiant quotes in military history. "Retreat? Hell. We're not retreating, we're just advancing in a different direction." This desperate advance led to one of the most cherished and humorous legends of the Korean War. The legend states that Marines, critically low on 60mm mortar rounds, whose code name was Tootsie Rolls, radioed for an emergency resupply. An Air Force operator who didn't have the code sheets supposedly took the request literally, and soon, pallets of actual Tootsie Roll candies were parachuted to the bewildered Marines. While historical analysis suggests the accidental airdrop story is likely a myth, the effect of the candy was no myth. Veterans recall a superabundance of them. In the minus 40-degree cold, standard C rations were frozen solid and impossible to eat. But Marines could place the small Tootsie Rolls in an armpit or mouth, thaw them, and get a critical, immediate source of sugar and energy. But the real story is one of pure battlefield ingenuity. This is the Miracle Patch. Marines discovered that a thawed Tootsie Roll, when molded like putty, could be used to patch bullet holes and shrapnel gashes in fuel lines, radiators, and other critical equipment. In the sub-zero air, the candy putty would refreeze in minutes, creating a rock-hard, durable seal. This Tootsie Roll patch allowed vehicles, many of which were carrying the division's wounded, to keep running, enabling the advance in a different direction. The Korean War is often called the Forgotten War, but it is actively remembered in Texas. The Texas Korean War Veterans Memorial stands on the state capitol grounds in Austin. Constructed of Texas Sunset red granite, it is inscribed with the names of the 1,723 Texans killed or missing in action from the conflict. Commander Samuel Dealey, a native of Dallas, Texas, was the commissioning commander of the USS Harder. The submarine's motto was "Hit 'em harder," a philosophy Dealey embraced completely. Post-war analysis confirmed he sank the most Japanese warships of any single U.S. submarine commander. A chillingly prescient line in his 1930 U.S. Naval Academy yearbook perfectly captured his character. The greater the stress, the more he smiled. Dealey was known for being particularly audacious. His signature high-risk maneuver was the down-the-throat shot. This tactic inverted the typical submarine-destroyer relationship. Instead of fleeing the destroyer, which was the submarine's primary predator, Dealey would wait for the enemy ship to charge at him on an attack run. As the destroyer bore down, Dealey would fire his torpedoes directly into its path and then promptly crash dive, to be terrifically rocked seconds later by the exploding ship as the Harder passed beneath. This was the submarine equivalent of a matador standing his ground. Dealey's 5th War Patrol in June 1944 was described by historians as epical. In a span of just 4 days, he located and sank 3 Japanese destroyers and severely damaged 2 others. This was not just a tactical victory, it had major strategic consequences. Dealey's rampage was taking place near Tawi-Tawi, the Japanese fleet's primary anchorage. By sinking their critical anti-submarine destroyer screen, he sowed chaos and forced Admiral Ozawa's mobile fleet to depart Tawi-Tawi a day ahead of schedule. This premature departure upset the Japanese battle plans, forcing their carrier force into the subsequent Battle of the Philippine Sea at a disadvantage and contributing directly to their crushing defeat. On August 24, 1944, during its 6th patrol, the USS Harder was sunk by Japanese depth charges. Commander Dealey and his entire crew of 78 men were lost. He was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor. For 80 years, the Harder was on eternal patrol. Then, in May 2024, the Lost 52 project confirmed the discovery of the submarine's wreck. It rests upright on her keel in more than 3,000 feet of water, a maritime grave and a final, poignant chapter to the story of the Hit 'em Harder crew. The story of Master Sergeant Roy P. Benavidez is one of profound, almost supernatural will. He was born in Cuero, Texas. His father, a Mexican-American, and his mother, a Yaqui Indian, both died of tuberculosis by the time he was 7. Raised by an aunt and uncle in El Campo, he dropped out of school at 15 to work in the cotton and sugar beet fields. To understand his Medal of Honor action, you must first know what happened on his first tour in Vietnam in 1965. Benavidez stepped on a landmine. He was evacuated to a hospital in Texas, paralyzed from the waist down. Doctors delivered a devastating prognosis. He would never walk again. They began his medical discharge paperwork. Benavidez refused to accept this. In a profound act of defiance, at night, in secret, when the medical staff was gone, he would painfully crawl out of bed, drag himself to a nearby wall, and practice standing. To the shock of his doctors, he not only stood, but eventually walked out of the hospital. He recovered so fully that he joined the elite special forces and volunteered to return to Vietnam. He was a man who had already defeated a final diagnosis through sheer will. On May 2, 1968, a 12-man Special Forces team was ambushed by an NVA battalion. At the forward operating base, Benavidez heard their desperate calls over the radio. A fellow soldier recalled that the gunfire sounded like a popcorn machine. Benavidez voluntarily boarded a rescue helicopter. He was armed only with a combat knife and a medical bag. He jumped from the hovering helicopter and ran 75 yards through withering enemy fire to the trapped team. He was immediately shot in the leg, face, and head. For the next 6 hours, Benavidez, bleeding heavily and repeatedly wounded, became the focal point of the battle. He pulled wounded survivors from the burning wreckage of a crashed rescue helicopter. He administered morphine, water, and ammunition to the other men. He called in airstrikes, directing them to devastating effect. He was shot in the stomach, thigh, and back. A bullet exited just beneath his heart. He was clubbed in the head with a rifle butt, breaking his jaw. He was bayoneted in both arms. And in a moment of brutal hand-to-hand combat, he killed an NVA soldier who attacked him with a bayonet, using only his knife. In all, he was credited with saving the lives of at least 8 men. When he was finally evacuated, Benavidez was a ruin. He had 37 separate bullet, bayonet, and shrapnel wounds. He was unconscious, covered in blood, and not breathing. He was pronounced dead. At the field hospital, a doctor placed him in a body bag alongside the other deceased soldiers. As the doctor began to zip the bag up over his face, Benavidez, unable to move, unable to open his eyes, and unable to speak, summoned the last ounce of life and will he possessed. He spat in the doctor's face. The shocked doctor stopped, unzipped the bag, and sent him to surgery. This single, primal act of defiance is a perfect thematic bookend to his secret, agonizing efforts to walk. Both times, official, rational authority had pronounced him finished, paralyzed, then dead. Both times, Benavidez responded with a non-negotiable act of will that defied their reality. He would spend another full year in the hospital recovering. His commander was so certain he would die that he put him in for the Distinguished Service Cross, fearing the Medal of Honor paperwork wouldn't be approved in time. It was only in 1981, after an eyewitness account from one of the men he saved finally surfaced, that his award was upgraded. President Reagan perfectly captured the story's unbelievable nature, stating, "If the story of his heroism were a movie script, you would not believe it." But no list of Texas heroes is complete without the man who became a legend, Audie Murphy. His life began in destitution in Hunt County, Texas. He was one of 12 children in a sharecropper family that his father eventually deserted. To support his mother, whom he adored, Murphy dropped out of the 5th grade to chop cotton for $1 a day. His legendary marksmanship was not a hobby, it was a necessity. He became a dependable rifle shot by hunting rabbits and other small game to feed his siblings. After Pearl Harbor, he tried to enlist. He was rejected by the Marines, Navy, and even the Army paratroopers for being too scrawny. Standing 5 feet 5 inches and weighing only 110 pounds, he was laughed at. Finally, his older sister adjusted his birth certificate to make him appear 18, and the Army accepted him. Even in basic training, he passed out during one drill. His company commander, likely trying to protect the undersized boy, attempted to transfer him to a cook and baker's school. Murphy later wrote this was the supreme humiliation. He stubbornly refused, insisting on being a combat soldier. His first and most defining battle was not against the German army, but against the low expectations of his own. His most famous act of bravery, for which he was awarded the Medal of Honor, occurred on January 26, 1945. Near Holzwihr, France, the 19-year-old second lieutenant and his company were attacked by 6 German tanks and waves of infantry, numbering around 250 men. As his unit was overwhelmed, Murphy ordered his men to fall back to a safer position in the woods. He remained at his forward command post alone, directing artillery fire. A nearby US M-10 tank destroyer was hit, set on fire, and began to burn, in imminent danger of exploding. Murphy climbed onto the burning vehicle, exposed to fire from 3 sides, and began manning its .50 caliber machine gun. He single-handedly held off the entire German advance for an hour. This action produced a famous and darkly humorous anecdote. As Murphy directed friendly artillery fire, the radio operator, hearing the battle, asked, "How close are they to your position?" From his perch on the burning tank destroyer, Murphy roared back, "Just hold the phone and I'll let you talk to one of the bastards." He was wounded in the leg but only stopped his attack when he ran out of ammunition. He then climbed off the tank, limped back to his company, refused medical treatment, and led them in a successful counterattack. His actions that day were credited with killing or wounding approximately 50 enemy soldiers. His July 1945 cover on Life magazine made him a national icon and caught the attention of actor James Cagney, who invited him to Hollywood. His transition was not easy. He was broke, at one point living in a tiny, converted garage he called "my cigar box." He was self-deprecating about his new career, telling a director, "You must remember I'm working under a handicap. No talent." Others saw the deep contradictions within him. Director John Huston fought to cast him in The Red Badge of Courage. Huston explained his choice. "They just don't see Audie the way I do. This little, gentle-eyed creature. Why, in the war, he'd literally go out of his way to find Germans to kill. He's a gentle little killer." This gentle killer persona manifested in anecdotes that reveal a man struggling with his past in an artificial world. Famed cartoonist Bill Malden called him a scrappy little son of a bitch. Murphy, the 5'4" wildcat, would get into bare-knuckle fistfights just for fun with stuntmen, and win. In another famous story, actor Hugh O'Brien, TV's Wyatt Earp, was famous for his quick draw and publicly bet $500 he could beat anyone in Hollywood. Murphy, the man who had actually used guns to kill, upped the ante to $2,500 with one condition: they use live ammunition. O'Brien, understandably, declined the bet. These stories are more than tough guy antics. They are a desperate, subconscious assertion of his own authenticity in a world of pretend fighters and pretend gunfighters that he found fake. A world where he could never truly escape the reality of what he had done. Murphy's post-war life was defined by a hidden war against what was then called battle fatigue. He suffered from severe insomnia and debilitating night terrors. He famously slept with a loaded pistol under his pillow and became addicted to sleeping pills in a desperate attempt to find rest. In an era of intense social stigma, Murphy performed what may have been his most profound act of courage. He spoke openly about his struggles. He publicly called for the US government to give more consideration and study to the emotional impact war has on veterans, and to extend healthcare benefits to address PTSD. This was an extraordinary act. It was one thing to be brave on a burning tank, an act of hot courage in battle. It was a far more difficult and cold courage for the nation's most decorated hero, a living symbol of invincibility, to publicly admit that his mind was wounded. He risked his entire reputation to provide cover for thousands of other veterans who were suffering in silence. Audie Murphy became the most decorated U.S. combat soldier of World War II, receiving every military combat award for valor available from the U.S. Army, as well as French and Belgian awards for heroism. In his home state, his legacy is actively preserved. June 20th is Audie Murphy Day in Texas. The Audie Murphy American Cotton Museum in Greenville features a 10-foot bronze statue of him. But his most fitting tribute is the Audie L. Murphy Memorial Veterans Hospital in San Antonio, the living legacy of his pioneering advocacy for veterans' health. From Dorie Miller's defiance of a system that tried to make him anonymous, to Roy Benavidez's defiance of paralysis and death itself, these stories illustrate a clear and potent archetype. The Texas template of valor is not simply about bravado. It is about an unyielding, often audacious refusal to accept a lesser outcome. We see powerful thematic connections. The defiant ingenuity of Marines patching radiators with Tootsie Rolls is the same spirit that drove Roy Benavidez to secretly teach himself to walk. The calculated audacity of Sam Dealey aiming down the throat of a destroyer is the same defiant confidence of Audie Murphy insisting on live ammunition in a Hollywood bet. We see the battle for valor versus recognition in the stories of Dorie Miller, who fought a second domestic war against a system that sought to render their heroism anonymous due to prejudice. And finally, we see servant leadership. Roy Benavidez volunteering to jump into a popcorn machine of gunfire, and Audie Murphy risking his reputation to advocate for veterans with PTSD. All are expressions of selfless sacrifice. These narratives, unbelievable, tragic, and at times darkly humorous, show, in human terms, that heroes are not born looking the part. They're forged, often in the most extreme crucibles, by the defiant choices they make. Which of these stories of defiant courage resonated with you the most? And are there other Texas heroes, from any generation, whose stories we need to tell? Let us know in the comments below. If you want to see more deep dives into the stories of heroes who refuse to quit, be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. Thank you for watching, and until next time, stay curious.